1991, Desert Storm. The United States fires 88 AIM-7 Sparrow missiles in air-to-air combat. Kill probability 40%. Less than half the missiles hit their targets. 2019, Syria. Israeli F-16s fire Python 5 missiles at Syrian aircraft. Kill probability near 100%. Every missile that launches finds its target. That's not incremental improvement. That's a fundamental change in how air combat works. Because when missiles never miss, the entire concept of dogfighting collapses. Maneuver doesn't save you. Speed doesn't save you. Experience doesn't matter when the weapon tracking you is smarter, faster, and more patient than any human pilot. This is why modern fighters avoid visual range combat. Why pilots eject the moment they hear missile warning tones. Why air forces invest billions in stealth rather than maneuverability. Because once the missile launches, survival stops being about skill and becomes about mathematics. And the mathematics are terrifying. Let me show you why modern air-to-air missiles almost never miss, what makes them so deadly, and why pilots who would have survived in 1991 have no chance today. The foundation is sensor fusion, a concept that sounds technical but means something devastatingly simple. The missile sees everything all the time from every angle and never loses track. Old missiles like the AIM-7 Sparrow relied on semi-active radar homing. The launching aircraft illuminated the target with radar, and the missile followed that reflected signal. If the launching aircraft broke radar lock, the missile went stupid and missed. Pilots exploited this. Get the enemy fighter to turn away, break his radar lock. The missile loses guidance and flies ballistic. That doesn't work anymore. Modern missiles like the AIM-120 AMRAAM use active radar homing. After launch, the missile guides itself. It has its own radar, its own processor, its own target track. The launching aircraft can turn away, defend itself, or engage other targets. The missile doesn't care. It has a mission. It will complete it. But active radar is just the beginning. The AIM-9X Sidewinder uses imaging infrared seekers that don't just detect heat, they see the target's shape. A MiG-29 has a distinctive thermal signature. Engines, exhaust, airframe heating from friction. The missile's seeker builds a thermal image and tracks specific features. Flares don't work against imaging infrared. Older heat-seeking missiles tracked the hottest source and could be fooled by flares burning hotter than engines. The AIM-9X looks at the thermal image and recognizes that a point source flare doesn't match the shape of an aircraft. It ignores the decoy and stays locked on the real target. Multi-mode seekers combine multiple sensors, radar and infrared, sometimes millimeter wave radar, sometimes optical tracking. The missile evaluates all inputs simultaneously and uses whichever sensor works best at any given moment. Flying through clouds, infrared is degraded, but radar works fine. The missile switches sensors automatically. The target deploys chaff, radar track is disrupted, but infrared maintains lock. The missile adapts, and pilots never know which sensor the missile is using, so they never know which countermeasure might work. The guidance algorithms are where it gets truly frightening. Proportional navigation was the standard for decades. The missile calculates where the target will be and flies toward that point. Simple, effective, but predictable. Skilled pilots could defeat it through violent maneuvers that kept changing the intercept calculation. Modern missiles use advanced proportional navigation with predictive algorithms. They don't just calculate where the target is going, they analyze the target's flight path, recognize maneuvering patterns, and predict what the pilot will do next. A pilot in a Su-35 sees a missile inbound. He brakes hard left, pulling 9 Gs, deploying chaff and flares. The missile already calculated that maneuver. It predicted the brake, adjusted course before the pilot even started the turn, and maintained intercept geometry throughout. The pilot thinks he's evading. The missile knows he's just following a predictable pattern. And it gets worse. Thrust vectoring gives missiles maneuverability that exceeds any aircraft. The AIM-9X can pull over 60 Gs. The Iris-T can execute 60 G turns. The Python 5 can turn 180 degrees in fractions of a second. No aircraft can match that. The best fighters pull maybe 12 Gs in extreme maneuvers. Pilots black out at 9 Gs. The missiles are pulling 6 times that, maintaining full tracking capability, adjusting course hundreds of times per second. When a thrust vectoring missile is tracking you, evasion isn't difficult. It's impossible. The motors changed everything too. Old missiles burned their fuel in the first few seconds, then coasted. Energy management mattered. If a pilot could force the missile to turn, to bleed energy, it might run out of speed and miss. Modern missiles use dual pulse motors. First pulse at launch, accelerating the missile to supersonic speeds. Then the motor shuts off during mid-course flight, conserving fuel. In the terminal phase, the second pulse ignites, giving the missile a massive energy boost right when it needs maneuverability most. A pilot thinks he's safe because the missile is coasting. Then suddenly it accelerates again, pulling impossible turns at point-blank range. There's no defending against that. The ranges are devastating too. The AIM-120D has an estimated range exceeding 100 miles. The European Meteor exceeds 125 miles. The Chinese PL-15 reportedly reaches 160 miles. That's beyond visual range by an order of magnitude. Pilots are dying without ever seeing the aircraft that killed them. But here's what makes modern missiles truly unstoppable: the kill chain supporting them. A missile doesn't operate alone. It's the endpoint of an integrated system spanning satellites, AWACS, ground radar, and networked fighters, all sharing targeting data in real time. An F-35 detects an enemy aircraft 150 miles away using its APG-81 radar. It doesn't fire immediately. It transmits that track to every friendly platform in theater through Link 16. An E-2D Hawkeye 200 miles away adds its own tracking data, refining the target's position and velocity. A satellite overhead confirms the track. Ground-based radar provides additional vectors. All of that data feeds into the missile before it even launches. The AMRAAM knows exactly where the target is, where it's going, and the optimal intercept trajectory. The launching aircraft fires. The missile flies a calculated path toward the intercept point, receiving continuous updates from every sensor in the network. If the target turns, satellites track it. If it climbs or dives, AWACS sees it. If it deploys countermeasures, multiple sensors discriminate real from false. The pilot being targeted has no idea how many sensors are watching him. He thinks he's fighting one aircraft. He's fighting an entire network, and networks don't miss. Combat data proves it. Israeli Defense Forces reported that AIM-9X missiles achieved near-perfect kill rates in recent conflicts. Exact numbers remain classified, but analysts estimate success rates exceeding 95%. The Ukrainian Air Force, using older R-27 and R-73 missiles, achieved significantly lower kill rates, reportedly around 60-70%, not because Ukrainian pilots are less skilled, but because their missiles lack the sensor fusion and guidance sophistication of Western systems. That 25-30% difference in kill probability translates directly to survival rates. An American pilot faces one missile and has a 5% chance of survival through evasion alone. A pilot with older weapons faces one missile and might have a 30-40% chance. Over multiple engagements, those probabilities compound. Survive 3 encounters, and the American pilot's chance of making it through drops to essentially zero. The pilot with older missiles might have a 5 to 10% cumulative survival rate. That's not a fair fight. That's systematic elimination. The time to impact collapsed too. In 1991, a pilot had 20-30 seconds from missile launch to impact. Enough time to assess, react, and execute defensive maneuvers. The AIM-120D at maximum range gives a pilot maybe 10-15 seconds of warning. At close range, it's 3 to 5 seconds. The AIM-9X from visual range impacts in under 2 seconds. Human reaction time is 0.2 to 0.3 seconds. Processing the threat, deciding on a response, and executing maneuvers takes another 1 to 2 seconds. By the time the pilot starts defending, half his available time is gone, And modern missiles don't give you time to think, they give you time to die. The lethality improvements are just as dramatic. Modern warheads use advanced fragmentation patterns designed to maximize damage. Tungsten rods pre-fragmented into optimal sizes, arranged in directional charges that focus blast effects toward the target. A proximity fuse detonates the warhead when the missile passes within lethal radius. Doesn't need a direct hit, just needs to get close. And close is 10-20 feet. At closing speeds exceeding Mach 4, that's effectively point blank. The blast doesn't just damage aircraft, it shreds them. Control surfaces torn off, hydraulics severed, engines destroyed, pilots killed by fragmentation penetrating the cockpit. Aircraft don't glide home with damage anymore, they disintegrate. The electronic warfare resistance is what terrifies defenders most. Old missiles could be jammed. Radar seekers had limited processing power and narrow frequency bands. A skilled electronic warfare officer could jam the seeker, spoof tracks, or confuse the missile's guidance. Modern seekers use frequency hopping radar that changes frequency hundreds of times per second. Jamming one frequency is meaningless when the seeker instantly switches to another. Digital signal processing filters out jamming attempts. The missile recognizes jamming patterns and ignores them. Advanced seekers even use jamming signals as homing beacons, tracking the source and destroying the jammer. You can't jam your way out of a modern missile. You're just helping it find you. Decoys fail too. Towed decoys simulate aircraft radar signatures, drawing missiles away from the real target. They worked against older missiles with simple tracking algorithms. Modern missiles analyze the entire electromagnetic environment. They see the decoy. They see the aircraft towing it. They calculate trajectories, compare signal strengths, evaluate maneuvers, and they recognize which target is real. Then they ignore the decoy and kill the aircraft. Every defensive measure pilots relied on for decades, flares, chaff, jamming, decoys, violent maneuvers, fails against missiles designed to defeat them. The strategic implications are staggering. Close-range dogfighting is obsolete. Getting to visual range means you're already in the envelope of thrust-vectoring missiles that never miss. The pilot who sees his enemy has already lost. Beyond visual range combat became the only viable engagement mode. Fire first, fire from maximum range, and turn away before the enemy responds. Because if you wait, if you try to close, if you rely on maneuverability, you die. Training changed completely. Air forces stopped teaching dogfighting techniques and started teaching missile employment, threat assessment, and network coordination. Because modern air combat isn't about flying skill. It's about systems management. The pilot becomes a sensor platform and weapons director. The aircraft is a data node. The missiles do the killing. And the pilot who tries to dogfight dies in seconds. China and Russia know this. That's why they developed long-range missiles like the PL-15 and R-77M. They're not trying to outmaneuver American fighters. They're trying to outrange American missiles and shoot first, because whoever shoots first probably wins. The missiles are too good, too smart, too fast for evasion to work anymore. The cost of this capability is enormous, but considered essential. An AIM-120D costs approximately $1.7 million, and AIM-9X costs around $600,000. High-end missiles like the European Meteor exceed $2 million each. But the alternative is losing aircraft worth $80 million to $150 million, losing pilots who took 10 years and millions of dollars to train, losing air superiority. Spending $2 million per missile is cheap when the target is worth 50 times that amount, and production ensures adequate stockpiles. Raytheon produces thousands of AMRAAMs annually. European consortiums manufacture Meteors and Iris-T missiles. The supply chain exists to sustain high-tempo operations. Unlike aircraft, which take years to replace, missiles can be produced in months. That gap matters in sustained conflicts where magazine depth determines who runs out of weapons first. The future is even more lethal. Artificial intelligence is being integrated into seeker algorithms. Missiles that learn from each engagement, recognize new threat patterns, and adapt autonomously without human input. Hypersonic missiles that reach targets in seconds rather than minutes. Directed energy weapons that travel at light speed. networked swarms where multiple missiles coordinate attacks autonomously. Every advancement makes evasion harder. Every improvement reduces pilot survival rates. The era of air combat where skill, experience, and aircraft performance determine survival is over. It ended somewhere between Desert Storm and Syria, in the decades when missiles became smarter than the pilots trying to evade them. Now, survival depends on not being detected, on launching first, on having better sensors, better networks, and better missiles than the enemy. Because once a modern missile launches, the fight is over. Not difficult, not challenging, just over. Why do modern air to air missiles almost never miss? Because they see everything. They adapt to every defensive maneuver. They ignore countermeasures. They pull impossible turns. They maintain energy throughout flight. And they're backed by networks that track targets through every evasion attempt. Pilots in 1991 had a fighting chance. Maneuver aggressively, use countermeasures, exploit missile limitations. Pilots today have mathematics, and the mathematics say that missiles pulling 60 Gs with multi-mode seekers and predictive algorithms don't miss. That's not warfare, that's execution. And it's why modern air forces obsess over stealth, sensor range, and shooting first. Because the only defense against missiles that never miss is never being targeted in the first place. Everything else is just waiting to die.